I have done my work and as I've helped people do the work over the years, as you begin to listen to their internal dialogue, the internal conversations that they're having with themselves and they've been having for decades, you realize that their whole vocabulary has been a vocabulary of victimization. They don't even have a vocabulary of victory. And so one of the things, if you want to get unstuck, there are some things you got to unlearn in your life. Write that down. If you want to get unstuck, there are some things that you are going to have to unlearn in your life. And as I was doing my work, I wrote a book called Upgrade Your Mind. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to get it. It came out years ago. But one of the things I talk about in that book, it's not enough for us to just say positive vibes and think happy thoughts and think positive thoughts. What we don't realize is that your mind is a garden, and whatever you plant into the garden of your mind is going to grow, whether it's positive or negative. Your subconscious mind does not know the difference between a positive and a negative thought. All it knows is to take what you put in it and to produce. And so we're saying think positive thoughts, but we have decades and generations of weeds and toxic thoughts and emotions and psychological constructs and limitations that have defined us, and we think because we put a few positive thoughts on it that it's going to change our lives. No, you got to uproot those things from your life. You got to unlearn them so that you can begin to get your life unstuck and move in a different direction. And it's not enough to think. You got to begin to not only uproot, but you got to replace those thoughts with the right thoughts so that you can get the right outcomes. A lot of times, what we don't understand is that those things have occupied serious mental real estate for years, decades. Some of it is generational patterns and pathologies that have been in our family line for a very long time. And so it's going to take more than thinking positive thoughts. You're going to have to do some deep work, and you're going to have to do what I call psychological revolution. You're going to have to totally transform your thinking in that area. A lot of people want to be free, but they don't understand that your freedom is not only begins with a decision, but it also necessitates the development of your mind. Write that down. Freedom begins with a decision, but it necessitates the development of your mind. And so a lot of people hear me today. I sound deep and powerful and prolific, but what they don't understand is you're hearing, I had to retrain and reprogram my mind to think victorious. I had to retrain and reprogram my mind to think like a conqueror, to think like a winner. So there's a lot of work that had to be done. You don't just do this overnight. You don't just wake up and everything is different. You got to put in the time and do the work. And as I tell people, the development of your mind is a lifetime process. Write that down. The development of your mind is a lifetime process. You're not going to do this in 2 weeks and be done. This is something that has taken me decades to do and still doing on a consistent basis. Why? Because if you replace, but if you remove but don't reinforce, you will repeat. Write that down. If you remove but do not reinforce, you will repeat. And so we remove certain things, but we don't reinforce the right thoughts, the right thought patterns, the right belief systems and constructs. So guess what? We go back and we start repeating the same cycle. Your mind is never empty. Your mind is never idle. There's always something that is being deposited into your thinking pattern and process. The world around you is projecting images, ideas, suggestions, philosophies. I could go on and on. You're being presented with that on a daily basis. And so you can't say, oh, I did that 15 years ago. Well, since then, 15 years of data and information has come into your mind. And if you are not consistent in not just removing but reinforcing the right things, you're going to be in that same pattern again. And so I can't say that, when I start talking about the mind, I could stay there all day. But we choose captivity because in a world without options, and obscured vision, oppression looks appealing. Let me say it again. We choose captivity because in a world without options and obscured vision, oppression looks appealing. And so as I've discovered in my own life and through conversations over the years, a lot of people, that's all they know is oppression. That's all they know is bondage. That's all they know is these certain triggers in their lives, psychological buttons and triggers and things, because they've never known another way to live. And so you have to be indoctrinated and exposed that there's even a greater reality or possibility for you. In other words, when we allow our past to become bigger than our futures. It is when we choose what is familiar over the great unknown. So many of us are afraid of the unknown. We are afraid of a life without trauma, without bondage, without scars, without emotional wounds and limitations and self-limiting beliefs and psychological construct. We don't know another reality. And so the thought of that is so crippling and debilitating for so many people, but you can live a different life. You know, it reminds me of the scripture that says, behold, I do a new thing, and it shall spring forth suddenly, though you cannot see it. In other words, it's unfolding. There's a new thing. There's always a new that wants to unfold in your life, but you have to be willing to let go of the old for that new to emerge. And so what we don't realize is that this entire journey is about emergence. It's about you becoming the greatest expression of who you were created to be. But you have to be willing to let go of the things that no longer serve you to embrace that life. Captivity is appealing because we have allowed history to make us its slave, and we have not had the courage to embrace healing. We have lived in that history so long that we have not had the courage to embrace healing, to know that there is a greater possibility or reality that is available to us if we would only renew our minds to a new possibility and way of living. We want liberation, but we are not willing to engage the battles that will bring about emancipation in our lives. We know that that the war for wholeness in our lives is one that we must all engage and be willing to fight and prevail for progress in our lives. I always say there are no breakthroughs without battles, and so you got to be willing to fight the battles, engage the battle, and not just engage the battle. You got to engage the battle and ultimately win the war if you want to experience a different life. The problem is that we want sympathy, but sympathy only keeps you in slavery. So many people want pity. They want people to feel sorry for them. They want to play the victim, woe is me, tell their sad story. And the reality is that you can keep playing the victim. You can keep saying woe is me. You can keep telling a story, but it's keeping you enslaved. It's keeping you in bondage, and it's robbing you of the life that you were intended to live. Responsibility ushers you into new realms and new possibilities for your life. So we can't keep rehashing the past, but we can take responsibility for our lives, and we can embrace new realms and new possibilities. The courage to interrupt the pattern creates the opportunity to embrace your true power. Let me say that again. The courage to interrupt the pattern creates the opportunity to embrace your true power. And so what I want you to do, I want you to get to the place of understanding your true power and owning that power, because that's where you begin to live life at its best. When I think about my journey, and people see me today and they admire and honor and respect the work that God is allowing me to ground the world and to touch people's lives. What they don't realize about this journey is that I had to do the work and I had to tap into my true power. And it's not an easy process. You got to be willing to let go of some things. You got to be willing to be broken. You got to be willing to be cut in discomforting places, because if you are going to emerge as the greatest expression of who you were created to be, you got to be willing to release the weights that stand in the way of the wholeness that God has always intended for your life. And if we want to soar, if we want to be elevated to that place that God intends for our lives to be, you got to be willing to be emancipated from some things. And so, in other words, an authentic life requires you to become skilled